Hi everyone, and welcome to our first video interview as part of Bounce Lab. My name is Adam Beck. I'm Executive Director of the Smart Cities Council for Australia and New Zealand, but also for the next 6 months, curator of Bounce Lab, which is our think tank that we've set up with our member companies at the Smart Cities Council, also with some friends from local government and state government. And these videos, and today's video, is an opportunity to have a conversation with one of our think tank members, unpack an issue, sort of pause and reflect on what we've been observing, and maybe share some insights and ideas and recommendations for some elements of an economic recovery in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Joining me today, Damian Hewitt from our member company, Sage Automation. Damian, thanks so much for joining us. How are you?
Yeah, good, Adam. Thanks for including us. It's fantastic.
No, pleasure. We're going to talk about sort of mobility and transport today, but before we do that, can I hand over to you for a quick bio? Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so my name's Damian Hewitt. I'm the General Manager for Transport for Sage Automation. So pretty much set the strategic vision for our mobility engineering solutions and our bid and delivery teams for our transport. Sage Automation is an independent system integration company that typically works in major projects from smart managed motorways to tunnel control systems, and in the smart cities realm, getting cheap data sets to be able to get back to your local governments and authorities, and that sort of in between the workload that we see.
We could talk about a lot of smart cities things today, but there's one thing I kind of wanted to sort of narrow in on. So let's just sort of set the context here for those that are viewing this video. So one of the areas that Bounce Lab is looking at is, or one of the questions that it's asking is, what outcomes do we want in the future? And in particular, what have we seen or experienced during this global pandemic that have made us think about, well, we'd like some things to change. We'd like different outcomes or better outcomes. And we're looking at that across a whole bunch of verticals. Mobility, which we'll talk about today, land use, real estate, commerce, landscape, utilities, so on and so forth. So we are looking at different outcomes. And today we're going to talk about mobility. And I've asked you to come on and have a conversation and a chat because last year I caught my eye on a very interesting sort of project that you guys were playing around in and still do, and this kind of product slash solution called Matilda. And what I want to do today in this chat is, what if we had Matilda up and running and available before COVID-19 came along? How would have our mobility system, public transport system, potentially changed or would have been value added to? And so we're going to sort of unpack that. So what I'll do, Damian, is I'm going to throw it straight over to you. Can you show us and explain to us what, why, and how, and who Matilda is? So I'll let you sort of share your screen there and sort of give us a bit of insights into Matilda.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So Matilda is a intelligent transit hub, and what happened with Matilda, we recognised that in the industry that we needed to have connected solutions for our mobility, and it started to evolve with our role in autonomous vehicle transport, particularly around the smaller type shuttle transit. And as we evolved and we looked at where this transport needed to commence, we saw a real need in the market for accessibility for disability and aged care groups. And so part of the technologies that we were looking to trial and demonstrate in our Matilda stock was technologies that would support everyone and connect all our solutions that we're rolling out in the transit network. So what we did is we had Matilda, we wanted Matilda to be very versatile and flexible. So Matilda was based on a shipping container footprint that it makes it portable. We recognise that the importance, particularly around a lot of metro projects that are happening and around the country, that to be able to maintain service and be able to communicate to the users of that public transport network, that they needed to be able to know where the stops were moving to in and around them construction zones. Matilda has the IBM Watson platform, so Matilda will talk to you, have a conversation. Matilda's meant to be fun. She's meant to tell you jokes and connect you to all the services that are local to where Matilda sits. So supporting local businesses. So if you've got a local coffee shop and someone wants to know where can I get a coffee, Matilda will tell you the best location to get the coffee from. Just pulling the data from the internet. So really what we're trying to do is open the endless possibilities of IoT data platforms to be able to be brought into a connected solution for the end user. The exciting thing about Matilda with disability needs, we're trialing technologies like sign language screens. So an avatar will come up in sign language for that type of disability. We've got if someone's blind, we can tell them that the second seat on the left is available and their bus will be here in 2 minutes. Certainly what we recognise in the marketplace right now is, and I think the road authorities are doing a good job of it, is not to necessarily be creating the apps, but creating the APIs that are free to the market and let the market determine how the data is used. And so we're connecting into lots of different data sources from the road authorities and using that to centralise data for communications at the stop. We think the stop is a centralised location that's critical for the future of our mobility and transport needs, particularly connecting the first mile, last mile part of the journey where transport systems currently fall down. We know that car parking spaces are becoming a luxury, and we know that people are travelling less than 400 metres between their home and the actual station, clogging up that part of the network. So we think that Matilda is that ideal solution to be able to connect the first mile, last mile, as well as the rest of
it. Take us inside. Have you got a little pic for us as to sort of? Oh, okay. So is this in situ? Is this real?
So this isn't real. This is how we envisage it. Matilda has been deployed in project zones, but you can see the concept of it being able to be moved around as required, particularly for events or any specialised type locations. This can be deployed very quickly. The communications from the operations role of the bus networks can be communicated very quickly to the people within the Matilda. It's very, you can see it fits into the environment. It's very beautiful, and trying to create a nice environment and feel to how it would look. As far as the way the screens and the works functions, you'll see this is a demonstration of some of the representing what the screens could and do look like. There's lots of tiles that connect to different metro areas, different spaces, advertising of supporting events in the region, knowing when the next trip is, how many people have booked it, what the availability is, security cameras, supporting security, and going back to operational support centres with assistance, help phones for anyone that's feeling unsafe or needs to understand the technology further. So that gives you a bit of an understanding of how that works.
Now we can see there, Damian, up in sort of the top, what's that? The top left on the screen. You've got the sort of the AV there. So you mentioned in the intro, kind of the original concept was sort of to sort of in partnership with potential AV kind of rollouts. However, when you go back to the previous slide, and when I see it kind of dropped in there, sort of in the wild, it kind of works as well. And I mean, that looks like an existing kind of either pull-up bay or taxi rank or whatever. So it could, and you could easily see a normal bus pulling up there, right, as part of the network. So I only knew Matilda last year as being something with an AV trial, but I sort of see now that kind of this has got an added level of sort of flexibility or agility in which you could sort of drop it into any even existing network.
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. I think that the issue with existing bus stops is they're quite inefficient because they're only allowing for one type of transport system operating on it. Whereas if you can have multi transport requirements at this stop location, tying in maybe Ubers, maybe e-scooters, whatever, you have that in a centralized control, that the data, and you know where all the where you can maneuver in around the stop can be exciting. I think one thing that we experienced even in our own neighbourhood, where we didn't really recognise how many transport options there were in the Tonsley precinct. And then once we put the Matilda there and investigated all the data sets and types of transport we could deploy into Matilda, we noticed there was about 12 different forms of transport that could have been utilised. But people that come to Tonsley wouldn't have a clue or understanding of how that works. And I think that's the real opportunity for Matilda, is to tying and creating more efficiencies in that transit movement.
Okay, so let's just sort of leave that there up on the screen and take it in. So I wanted to talk about Matilda, but I kind of didn't. What I wanted to do was use Matilda to get our sort of juices flowing in terms of sort of ideas and opportunities and recommendations. And so let me sort of kick off here. So and I'm kind of going to be a little bit suburban here in this conversation, because one of the interesting observations, not just by me, but many others, have been the kind of suburbs have come alive during the lockdown, right? You know, with a lot of us working from home, it's turned out that the CBD is quite empty and dead, but the suburbs are really coming alive. So, you know, I'm where I live, northwest side of Brisbane. You know, I've got my local kind of shopping village arrangement just down the road. It's like 5 minutes walk. So Coles, Bottle Shop, Domino's Pizza. It's just done a big refurb. It's got kind of 3 to 4 restaurants, good Chinese restaurant, and there's a French one. There's a burger joint. There's a bakery. So you're getting a sense of what this is. It takes up sort of a city block. The bigger kind of restaurants have, had to close down. They've been able to get some sort of takeaway, delivery only sort of functionality up and running. My little coffee shops, thankfully, they're just a hole in the wall. They're going gangbusters.
Yeah.
So sort of the neighborhood center, or the neighborhood shopping village, has kind of, become cool during the lockdown. But, not a lot of elderly going out there. So I don't know if that's probably, health and mobility and a few other bits and pieces. What goes through my head is, what is is there an opportunity to sort of achieve a number of goals here? So I'm hearing that everyone's loving the level of walking and cycling that's going on. I'm hearing that people are worried about using public transit. And we've got small businesses that kind of, need help. They need sort of stimulus and support and things like that. So for me, trying to reimagine what public transport looks like in sort of like a suburban center, walking, cycling. And one thing, and I'll shut up in a moment, but one thing also is the hunger that both customers, consumers, and the community have wanted in terms of data and information about what local traders are doing, what are their hours, what are they offering, but also on the merchant side, their ability to push out information. Yes, we're open. No, we're closed. We've shut down, but we do offer this. So there's this mashup here of local data and information and pushing it out, promoting walking and cycling, but also having safe, healthy transit as well, whether it's sort of AV, autonomous, or otherwise. It kind of sort of comes to a head for me that this is a really interesting proposition that we've got up on the screen here, and I wonder what the sort of the post-COVID kind of opportunities are for a rethink on these kind of micro hubby, intelligent kind of places or spaces could be. So I know I've rambled a little bit, but this really sparks some ideas for me. I mean, what are your views or take or responses to what I've mentioned there?
Yeah, I 100% agree with Adam. I think the opportunity here is to think about how are we going to transition back into normal transit and transport. I think, obviously your mass transport, there's going to be a complication of, how do we ensure that the person next to us is well, and so I think that the opportunity that is for us to actually have a stronger connected solution, and I think you're right, from the regional type shopping complexes and the likes and to local community, the opportunity now is to have that connected, and the type of data sets that we do have in being able to start to run algorithms for where people are moving, where they're going to move ahead of time. The systems that are out there that can actually know exactly where someone's going to move before they even move there, and that allows for our transport to actually do predictive movements on where our systems should be, and create a lot of efficiencies, and making sure that they're bringing them to the locations that they want. I think the other thing is that we've got to be really careful about how we do move forward. I think what we don't want to do is leave behind the vulnerable groups. So particularly your disability, your aged care type people. I think my nana is 90, and I start to think, how is she going to start to move around in these times where, if she was to get this in that high-end vulnerable group, how do we make sure that we create transport that's going to protect our elderly and our disability and get them out? And because we know that when people lose their mobility, that's when they deteriorate most rapidly. So I think that the answer is in the technologies and how we connect. And I think that if we can connect and get businesses to be able to get the wayfinding information and get the information connected into centralized systems like a Matilda, that can create a solution that then can bring all of the solutions from that community together. And I think that I think that's the opportunity that we can really make a difference, moving forward.
Yeah, and I shared this experience with our mobility task force, I think early March or whenever it was. I'm a daily bus user, so I bus from down the road to the office and back each day. And there's an elderly woman, not every day, but like 2 to 3 days a week, she catches the same bus as me. It's a 6 a.m. bus, and if you remember, she showed up. This must have been late March. She showed up to the bus stop, and she was wearing rubber washing up gloves. Dish gloves.
Yeah.
She'd made her own face mask. This was before sort of the real hard lockdowns came. And we were having a little chat. She's a survivor of jaw cancer. She's lost part of her jaw. And so she's just hypersensitive and vulnerable. Not only she's elderly, she must be in her 70s, but also just at the time. And she was very calm. And I was having a little chat to her. We don't know each other well, but enough to sort of have a chat about our day. And she was just freaking out about stepping on the bus, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of look at this and I think, imagine, and technically, and from a data perspective, I mean, this is all possible. Like, imagine having a setup in here whereby, it's push here if you're a pensioner or a senior, and you don't want to get on the bus. She had to catch 2 buses to get onto the south side of the city. Push here. We have a voucher system, or we're subsidizing, Uber trips for the elderly, who are concerned. I ended up putting her in an Uber around the corner and plugging in where she had to go. She goes to look after her great aunt who's sick as well. So, your point there about our community's most vulnerable, and for them, as we know, public transport is just key. But I look at the bus stop that where we get on, and it's nothing but sort of 2 benches, noisy traffic on a main road, and nothing else. A little sign that says, this is when it comes, on a poster. So there is just an entire new experience, not only for sort of our most vulnerable, but others as well.
Yeah, I think also the transit creates a lot of anxiety, and I think that if you can understand, where that next bus is coming, or if there is a breakdown or something that's happened ahead, an opportunity to be notified in real time to say, oh, you know what, your bus has broken down, it is going to be delayed. As long as people understand and know what's happening, I think that brings that anxiety level down, and I think allows people to use the transport networks.
Yeah.
I think.
We're all sort of polishing up the crystal ball at the moment as we get in this transition phase of sort of starting to ease lockdowns, and a lot of futurists are working overtime to predict the post-COVID world. From a mobility perspective, Damian, a couple of just point blank questions. Do you think? Do you think much is going to change?
Well, I hope it does. I'm not convinced that it will, but I think that we can see the benefits that we're gaining out of having low congestion, working from home, and having low traffic movements, less pollution. So the benefits that COVID has offered our community already has been good. What we need to do is learn from that, so that we can actually deploy the benefits of that into our real life living. And I think that if we can think about how vehicle movements need to work along with our, cycling's up, that's great. How do we create safe transport that enables vehicle movements and cycling to work together? And I think that if you have a look at the autonomous vehicle type market and the concept of dedicated paths for smaller autonomous services, really could change the game for how we actually do move forward. So I'd like to think that we're starting to think about how we use technology more smarter, rather than continually building wider pavements, because we certainly know that widening pavements doesn't reduce congestion. All it does is it just makes more vehicles travel down and congest in the future. So we've really got to be smarter about how we can adopt the future of AVs, electric vehicles, for how our mobility needs are going to be worked, and compromise it and build that into smarter, nicer, beautiful environments with cycle movements. I think the other thing to add about Matilda, I think what Matilda does add is it allows for technology to be built roadside. So what we're seeing with smart cities concepts are a lot of cabinets, a lot of electrical is going out into our environments and making them ugly. But if we can actually build our intelligence into beautiful roadside infrastructure of furniture, we can create a beautiful urban design, but still have the intelligence there. So I think there's a level of design and thought, more thought needs to be put through in how we actually build our infrastructure in the future, I think.
Now, you've clearly sort of indicated that the original concept for Matilda was sort of, back of a truck shipping container drop down. Yeah. So that ability to be nimble and agile and relocatable is sort of, highly valuable. Have you ever played with the idea of sort of a more permanent design, or maybe just share more broadly? Have you got thoughts on Matilda's role in the world sort of going forward? What are you playing with?
Yeah, so we see Matilda as the software platform that enables for the connectivity of the IoT world. Matilda doesn't necessarily need to be a large portable stop like you see in front of you. We can adapt this type of technology to existing stops, and depending on the opportunities or what that stop or station requirements are, we can tailor that technology up or down as required. As far as the mobility part of it, we do see a really important part that Matilda can play as a shipping container type construct. The requirements for particularly around events and how people need to move around in temporary type situations, Matilda could play a really critical role there as well. So we've got the large hardware easily deployable, but also can tie it to existing stocks as well.
I'm going to paint maybe just a final a final little discussion point in terms of not a use case, but I'm imagining sort of a future scenario here. But you know, heaven forbid another crisis sort of comes. Like, does you know, does Brisbane City Council have sort of 24 of these stacked out at the depot on standby, and sort of what happens? I mean, I could see it. I'm sort of, you know, near a centre, so if I just think sort of around me, I've got sort of, you know, neighbourhood and shopping sort of centres. So Brookside, Everton Park, further down the road, you've got Stafford. I mean, I can imagine these being dropped out, you know, in sort of major suburban areas. You kind of flick the switch on. It's a place now, because we've wanted to generate, to some extent, foot traffic around some of these local traders. And there's been a lot of activity, a lot of hive in, you know, the small coffee shops and takeaways. But, you know, you sort of drop them down, you switch them on. You got data coming through for, you know, the local community about what's on offer, and equally you've got this platform for local traders to push out. I mean, is this sort of rainbows, fairies, and unicorns kind of thinking, or I mean, you know, it's kind of seems like an ideal sort of asset to have for a rainy day.
Absolutely, Adam, and that's part of it. We are talking to some councils so that they can use Matildas like that. It is fully self-contained. It's got the solar and batteries, so you truly can just drop it down a location. It works on GPS, so it knows where it is. It knows what local businesses are in and around it, so it can automatically connect and know how what it needs to communicate to the user, depending on where you use it. So the fact that you can actually store these and then deploy them when required gives a city a huge amount of ability to be able to communicate to their public transit users very, very quickly.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, that's been that's been good. I mean, the purpose of the call for me was to sort of drop Matilda on the table and have a conversation about what it means and what it can do and what it can stand for, and sort of the thinking and solutions that come from that. And this intersection, I think, between what we're trying to promote at Bounce Lab, which is digital data economic recovery. And that involves small business, it involves consumers, it involves mobility and moving around. And I think this is a really nice bit of stimuli as we sort of ponder and reflect on what's been happening and what might happen going forward. But Damian, thanks so much for joining us on the call to sort of unpack a few ideas. Really appreciate you joining us, and look forward to chatting again soon.
Yeah,